I stared at the glowing screen of my phone until the text message blurred into a jagged smear of blue and white. The words, "No place for losers," searing themselves into my mind like a brand. It's funny how a single sentence, sent with the casual flick of a thumb, can dismantle 30 years of shared history, Sunday dinners, and the silent promises brothers make to one another in the dark of a childhood bedroom. My name is Elias. I'm 42 years old, and for the last decade, I've been the person my family calls when the lights are about to be turned off or when the radiator starts its death rattle in the middle of a February freeze. I'm a freelance accountant, a paper pusher, as my younger brother Julian likes to say, working from a small, sun-drenched apartment that smells of old books and peppermint tea. I've never owned a Ferrari or a summer home in the Hamptons, but my ledgers always balance, and my conscience has always been clear. Or so I thought until that message arrived 3 weeks before Christmas. Life before that text was quiet, predictable, and, in my eyes, beautiful. My mornings usually began at 6 a.m. I'd grind coffee beans by hand, the rhythmic crunch-crunch the only sound in the kitchen besides the distant hum of the city waking up. I liked the tactile nature of my life, the weight of a heavy fountain pen, the texture of the thick cardstock I used to send birthday cards to my nieces, and the way the afternoon sun hit the dusty ivy on my windowsill. Julian was the opposite. At 35, he was the star of the family. He worked in high-end real estate, or at least that's what he told our mother. He wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent and spoke in a rapid-fire staccato about market trends and disrupting the industry. We were close, or so I believed. Every couple of months, Julian would come over, his face pale and his hands slightly shaking, talking about a temporary liquidity crunch or a delayed commission. "Elias, man, I just need a bridge," he'd say, leaning against my kitchen counter, looking out of place in his designer loafers. "Just $5,000 to get through the month. I'll have it back to you by the 15th, with interest. I swear on Dad's memory." And I, being the older brother who remembered holding his hand through the flu and teaching him how to tie his shoes, would sigh, open my laptop, and transfer the money. I never asked for the interest. I never even asked for the principal back. To me, family wasn't a transaction. It was a safety net. I lived modestly, driving a 10-year-old sedan and buying my clothes from thrift stores, precisely so I could be that net. My mother, Sarah, lived in the old family home 3 towns over. She was 80 now, her hands gnarled by arthritis but her mind as sharp as a tack. She spent her days knitting sweaters that were always slightly too large and listening to the radio. I visited her every weekend, bringing groceries and fixing the leaky faucets he never seemed to have time for. "Julian is doing so well," she'd say, her eyes sparking with pride as she pointed to a framed photo of him at some gala. "He's so busy, Elias. He's going places." I just nod and smile, peeling an orange for her. "He sure is, Mom. He sure is." I never told her that the busy man she adored was currently living on my loser savings. The shift happened in late November. Usually, by then, Mom and I would have already coordinated the Christmas menu. But this year, when I called her, she sounded hesitant. "Oh, Elias," she whispered, the sound of a television soap opera blaring in the background. "Julian is handling everything this year. He's renting a private lodge up in the mountains. He says it's going to be a black tie family event. Very exclusive." I felt a small, cold prickle of unease. "That sounds expensive, Mom. Is he sure he can handle that?" "He says he's had a record-breaking quarter," she replied, though I could hear the slight tremor of uncertainty in her voice. "He told me he'd send out the formal invites via email." I waited. A week passed, then 2. My inbox remained empty, save for spam and client invoices. I figured it was just Julian being Julian, disorganized and frantic. I decided to call him on a Tuesday evening. The phone rang 5 times before he picked up. "Elias, I'm in the middle of a closing," he snapped. "No, hello. No, how are you? Sorry, Jay. Just calling about the Christmas details. Mom mentioned a lodge? I haven't seen the info yet." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could hear the muffled sound of a car door slamming and the chirp of a security system being armed. "Look," Julian said, his voice dropping into a tone I didn't recognize. Cold, clinical, and utterly devoid of the brotherly warmth he usually reserved for when he needed a loan. I've been thinking, this year is about branding, networking. I've invited some very high-level investors and colleagues to this Christmas retreat. It's a specific vibe, Elias. A vibe, I repeated, leaning back in my office chair, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. Julian, it's Christmas. It's family. It's my career, Elias. And let's be honest. He let out a sharp, jagged laugh. You don't exactly fit the success image I'm projecting. You're still wearing the same corduroy jacket from 2012 and talking about tax codes. It's embarrassing. I want Mom there and I've got the cousins coming. But you'd just be a reminder of a life I've outgrown. I was speechless. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Are you saying I'm not invited? I finally managed to whisper. I'm saying this is a winner's circle this year, Elias, he said, and I could almost hear the smirk on his face. And frankly, there's no place for losers at this table. Don't worry. I'll tell Mom you had a work emergency. It's better for everyone. He hung up. 10 minutes later, he sent the text that broke the camel's back. Asterisk, seriously. Don't show up and make it awkward. You're a great guy, but you're a basement-tier brother. Stay home, eat some canned soup, and let the adults enjoy the view. No place for losers. Asterisk. I sat in the dark for a long time, the only light coming from the blue glow of my phone. I looked at my bank statement on my second monitor. I looked at the folder labeled J Loans on my desktop. Then I started to type. The first thing I did wasn't loud or angry. I simply opened a fresh spreadsheet. In my world, numbers don't lie. They don't have egos, and they don't send cruel text messages at midnight. As I began to pull records from the last 3 years, the sheer scale of my loser contributions laid bare the reality of Julian's winner lifestyle. Over $42,000. That was the bridge money. That was the liquidity crunch relief. I found the transfer for his car down payment 3 summers ago. I found the 6 months of rent assistance when he was supposedly between high-end firms. But the real discovery came when I looked into the private lodge he had bragged about. A few clicks into the public records of the luxury rental agency showed the booking. The deposit had been paid 2 months ago, right around the time Julian had come to me crying about Mom's medical bills that he claimed he had covered and needed reimbursement for. I had given him $8,000, no questions asked, terrified for our mother's health. I called Mom the next morning, my voice steady, though my hands were cold. Mom, how are you feeling? How's the hip? Did the specialist Julian found help with the inflammation? Specialist? Oh, Elias. She chuckled softly, the sound of her knitting needles clicking like a clock. I haven't seen a doctor in months. Thank God. I've just been doing my stretches like you showed me. Why do you ask, dear? The air left my lungs. He hadn't just insulted me. He had used our mother's aging body as a prop for a payday. He had stolen from my future to fund a winner's circle that was built on a foundation of lies. The betrayal didn't feel like a sharp cut. It felt like a heavy, drowning weight. This was the brother I had protected from bullies. This was the man I had helped pack when he moved out of his first apartment. I didn't yell. I didn't call him and scream. Instead, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out a stack of promissory notes. Julian, in his moments of performative guilt, had insisted on signing them over the years. Just for your records, bro, he'd say with a wink, to show I'm serious. I'm an accountant. I take records very seriously. I spent the next week in a state of quiet, focused movement. It was the busiest time of the year for my clients, but I made time for one specific set of tasks. I didn't uninvite him from my life. He had already done that. I simply stopped being the invisible engine that kept his life moving. I called the utility companies for the luxury condo he lived in, the ones registered in my name because his credit score was too unconventional for the building's taste. I told them I was moving and requested a service shut-off for December 20th. Next, I drafted a very professional, very polite letter. I attached every single bank transfer, every signed note, and a copy of the text message he had sent me. I didn't send it to a lawyer, not yet. I sent it to Julian. I sent him a single reply to his "no place for losers" text. Asterisk, I understand perfectly, Julian. A winner like you shouldn't have to rely on a basement-tier brother. Since there's no place for me at your table, there's no place for your debt in my books. Pay your own bills. All of them. Starting now. Asterisk. The fallout was instantaneous. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Are you insane? He screamed into my voicemail an hour later. The power is going out. My car lease is being flagged for a missed payment because the auto transfer from your account bounced. You can't do this, Elias. It's Christmas. I didn't pick up. I sat in my quiet apartment, drinking my peppermint tea, watching the snow begin to dust the ivy on my windowsill. The next day, the investors Julian had invited to the mountain lodge began to call me. It turns out, Julian had listed me as his chief financial officer and primary shareholder to give himself a veneer of family wealth stability. They wanted to know why the catering deposit had been declined. I'm sorry, I told a very confused man named Mr. Sterling. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a paper pusher with no involvement in Julian's ventures. I'm sure a winner like him has a backup plan. I then called my mother. I told her I was coming to pick her up. We weren't going to a lodge. We were going to stay at a small, cozy bed and breakfast I had booked months ago, just in case. But Julian said. She started, her voice small. Julian is very busy with his adult friends, Mom, I said gently. Let's let him enjoy his view. The mountain lodge was exactly what Julian had promised. Floor-to-ceiling glass, white marble fireplaces, and a view of the snow-capped peaks that looked like a postcard. But as I later heard from our cousin Sarah, the view inside was much colder. By the time the sun set on December 23rd, the winner's circle began to collapse. Without my quiet monthly transfers, Julian's credit cards, the ones he used to project an image of effortless wealth, snapped like dry twigs. The catering staff, professional and polite, refused to set the table when the final payment failed to clear. The high-level investors sat in a beautiful hollow house with no food, no heat, and a host whose face was turning a frantic shade of gray. The truth came out not in a dramatic explosion, but in the awkward, stuttering explanations Julian had to give when his guests asked why the lights were flickering. Mr. Sterling, the investor, didn't stay long. He wasn't interested in a disruptor who couldn't even keep the radiators humming. By Christmas Eve, the lodge was empty. Julian was left alone with a mountain of debt and a view of the darkness. The family eventually found out why I wasn't there. When Julian tried to paint me as the villain who abandoned him during a crisis, I simply forwarded the group chat the ledger of his medical bill, lies, and his final text to me. The silence that followed in the family thread was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I spent my Christmas at that small bed and breakfast with my mother. There was no white marble, but there was a roaring fire and the smell of cinnamon and pine. We sat in mismatched armchairs, and for the first time in years, we didn't talk about Julian's success. We talked about my father, about the old days, and about the quiet peace of a life well lived. I'm sorry I didn't see it, Elias, Mom said, patting my hand. Her touch was warm, and for once, her eyes weren't searching the door for a son who was always too busy to stay. It's okay, Mom, I replied. Sometimes the people who build the walls are the ones who end up trapped behind them. I'm just happy to be on this side of the glass. I've started a new ledger this year. It's not for loans or bridges. It's for my own travels, for Mom's actual comfort, and for the simple joys I used to put on hold. Julian reached out a few weeks ago, asking for one last chance to talk. I haven't replied yet, not because I'm angry, but because I finally realized that being a winner isn't about the view from the top. It's about who is standing next to you when the lights go out. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How we often spend our lives protecting the very people who wouldn't even hold a door open for us if our hands were full. We carry their burdens, we bridge their gaps, and we whisper their praises to a world that doesn't know the truth. But there comes a moment when you realize that your kindness isn't a weakness. It's a fuel. and you have to decide if you're going to keep using it to power someone else's ego, or if you're finally going to use it to light your own way home. I chose to stop being the invisible foundation for a house that didn't want me inside. And for the first time in my life, I feel truly at peace. But I want to ask you something tonight. Have you ever been made to feel like a loser by the very people you were busy saving? How did you finally find the strength to let go and let them pay their own price? Tell me your story in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Broken Trust Stories for more reflections on family, justice, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. Take care of yourselves, and remember, your worth is never defined by someone who doesn't know how to value you. Good night.